We can see your screen.
Okay, thank you. So we begin. For the purpose of this presentation or this, let's say, knowledge sharing session, by the end of it, we hope to all understand, what the GTM strategy and process is. I believe that for maybe a lot of us here, we already, know what this looks like, but various perspectives, right? So we hope to understand what the strategy and the process are, who the GTM teams and, excuse me, collaborators are, and some of the things that GTM teams and collaborators do in the process of taking a product to market. So, like ICP development, value proposition development, sales enablement, the actual GTM motion, which most people confuse to be a full GTM strategy, what you can do and how you can possibly succeed as a founding sales hire, and what overall success looks like, of course, for a technical salesperson, or if you're here and you are a product marketing person in a sales led company, what success looks like for the efforts that you put in as well. All right, so let's start off with the unseen part of the GTM. This is the part that most people don't see. The earlier parts, the considerations that you make, the research that you do, understanding the product, understanding the market. This is the part of the GTM that is called the unseen. So what people usually see is, all the later outcomes, the announcements and things like that. The GTM strategy looks very different for various companies, even for similar companies, as you can see in the example on the right, Coda and Notion. These are companies that we can actually say do almost the exact same thing. Database, wiki, a second brain, as some people call them, a place to put your thoughts, a place to project manage, a place to put information about teams, about companies, a place to even host something of a small knowledge base or a website. They do the same things. But in terms of product strength, some people argue that Coda is a more mature product, even though they're similar. Some people argue that Coda makes some things easier. But while these companies choose a customer marketing perspective, so you see them do things like prioritize various users, showing their demos of the product. So, for example, you can have a company that uses Coda create templates that can serve various customers. An example is the Product Marketing Alliance. They have a Coda and they have public templates they've created. Same with Notion. There's a very popular person called Islo who creates numerous templates, both paid and free. Um, there is some suspicion that that is entirely an influencer marketing strategy, but both businesses offer the same things and sometimes take the same approach to GTM. But there's some major differences with how they take their GTM motion on. On the Notion side, there have been acquisitions of smaller businesses that have already established themselves in areas that Notion hopes to expand to. So Notion bought Cron, and I think they recently acquired another product recently. So they're sort of building out their scheduling, time and product and project management angle. And they seem to have the wiki and other areas settled. So they're moving into other points. And of course, this means broadening the amount of customers that they serve. For Coda, they take a more sales-led approach. Most people don't know Coda as well, and that's because I think their ICP is a bit different. So they focus on those types of people. So while this is an example of businesses that are similar, but take on various GTM strategies. So the GTM process is, what breaks down the GTM strategy. It usually involves these steps, and it looks different for various businesses. So if you're here and you're B2C, at some point you see something familiar. if you're here and you're B2B, you probably feel more at home with, what you're seeing at the moment. But for B2C, some parts are here, some parts are not. So it looks different for various businesses. D2C as well has a more B2C focused strategy. You will notice that some D2C businesses, D2C is direct to customers. So examples of D2C businesses are businesses that don't have middlemen. So think of, sometimes you can think of Amazon, you can think of 8 Sleep. 8 Sleep is a mattress and sleep focused company. So they sell directly to their customers most of the time. There's no middleman. Fertility is also one. They sell fertility product and fertility knowledge resources to people. So those are some D2C brands. But essentially, these processes encompass what you would find in various GTMs. They may have different names and follow different standards, but most of the time they're the same. So in the pre-development part of things, we're tech sales, so this is also on the imagination that it's a tech product. On the pre-development part of things, you have product and feature ideation. So I would say that many times what you have on the extreme right, which is pre-launch, is what most people focus on, most teams focus on, and they do not necessarily involve the sales and marketing teams on what you have on the left, which is what happens in pre-development and near post-development. Most people focus on pre-launch. Okay, so the product is ready. Let's go. Let's start reaching out to those customers whose names we have. Start calling your people. Go into LinkedIn Navigator and start doing what you do best. But the best GTM process is one that involves GTM teams from the start. So you have product and feature ideation. Here you would expect the product manager on your team to tell you why you're building this product. That question has to be answered, because then the wheels start turning. Who am I selling to? From what I've heard, from what I've seen in the market, from what I've researched, these businesses don't necessarily need this. You also need to understand why, because at various points, a product or a service can be too early, can be rightly timed, and can be too late. You also want to understand why, because for various businesses, what you're offering could be a nice to have, what you're offering could also be a desperate need and something that isn't seasonal. So there's a desperate need for the moment, and there's a desperate need that will continue along. So things like, think regulatory services or KYC services. These are businesses that, for as long as time exists, as long as the business exists, they will continue to have to. I'm so sorry for the noise. There's a marching band for whatever reason around me. So if you start to hear less of my voice and too much of that, please let me know so I can switch to some other sound source. Okay, so for various teams and various businesses, you definitely want to understand why. So these are questions that you pose to your product team. So there are some outcomes in this area. In the product and feature ideation, you expect outcomes like a PRD. PRD is a product requirement document, what the product is supposed to do, but that's in terms of functionality. So also in product and feature ideation, you want to expect maybe a document that explains why. So let's call it a brief. You want a document that explains why. You want a document that explains who the product manager imagines needs this. You want to understand what the complexities of building the product are. Is it complex? Is it not so complex? You also want to understand why, because if it's a less complex product to build and it's going to take a shorter time to build, but will result in higher revenue, then that's probably a yes, depending on what the framework for your team is. So there has to be a why we develop this product framework in place. So obviously this process assumes that that already exists, but you need to have a why we build this process in, why we build this product in place. So low complexity, high potential for revenue. You also have the why, because are we building this because some certain set of customers are asking for it? If the customers are high revenue, high volume customers, then most times that's completely understandable. Also, there are cases where the product is going to be built because a portion of the user base that currently contributes, let's say, 30% of revenue, could use this product and then climb up to producing 50% of revenue. So all these things help you understand why we're building it. We move on to market research and assumptions. So this is where you can say things like, oh yes, I've seen similar products, they're doing well, but there's a gap in the market. And I think that if we develop in so and so way, we can fill that. Then we move on to early or ideal customer profile development. Most schools of thought in sales, I'm not a full salesperson, but most schools of thought in sales will tell you that you need to be very strict about ICP. It's either exactly what you want, that one picture, or nothing. But I tend to take it from a more flexible point of view. Not all businesses are in the self-assured standpoint where they can say, this is the exact picture of the customer that I'm looking for. And if it's not that customer, I'm not going to sell to them. So that will initiate some sort of selling stubbornness where you have a one-track mind, you're selling in a specific way, your messaging is created in a specific way, but not for other people, right? So I believe that your ideal customer profile should be a bit broad, depending on the kind of business that you are or the stage that you're on. And as you grow bigger, or as you grow vertically, or as you achieve product market fit, your ICP starts to narrow down. So think of it like a cone or a triangle. So at the base, you will have the biggest possible sample, which is what you can have at the start. And then you can start to build that as building blocks until you get to the top. Maybe you're a later stage company, you now have a very direct ICP. So think of CrowdStrike. Most people didn't know CrowdStrike before the outage. I knew CrowdStrike just as a name I would see on Formula One cars, but I never bothered to research because it didn't strike a chord. So most businesses that have a very narrow ICP are hardly ever popularly known. They're making a lot of money, but sometimes we don't know them because they've gotten to that point where they can focus only on the people that they want to serve. Sorry, I can't see everyone, so is that a question?
Hi, Jaden. You can continue. There'll be a session for question and answers,
Okay,
but it's not a question.
okay, thank
You're
you.
welcome.
So for competitive analysis, this is where come to grips with what's happening in your market. What's pricing like for this product? So we've agreed about everything up to competitive analysis. What's pricing like? How do we extract insights for what's happening, and so on? What are our competitors serving people? Do they have something similar? Do they have something better? What can our edge be? So you have different kinds of competitors. You have direct competitors. You have crouching tigers, so they do not seem like they're interested in your market or the niche you're building in, but they actually have the potential to do that. So you have to look at those angles, and then you move on to value proposition development. Not to waste time, I'll just run through everything we have. You look at pricing strategy, the math of willingness to pay. You look at success metrics. So at the end of this development, at the end of having this product, how much do we want to charge, and do we think that this price is competitive? Do we think we can make profit from it? Do we think that this price is worth the product? And then we move on to post development, also a place that most businesses do not involve their sales teams, product education, and team testing. So sometimes the sales team is not invited to test, especially when it's a really technical product. Some people say tech sales, they hire people under the tag of tech sales, but they do not necessarily expect those salespeople to understand technical concepts or expect them to just, grab the knowledge as they go along. So sometimes product education is a flat file, something simple that they expect them to understand, and in most cases, simply regurgitate. So at surface level, you find that in teams that do not prioritize post-development or product education, the sales team members can understand the basics of the product, but once you drill one extra layer deeper, there's nothing. So this is a very important part of GTM. Testing is as well. So this is another part where you require whoever it is holding charge on the product side to say, okay, this is a testing framework. So test this button, test this API call, give me the observation, tell me how many seconds it took for you to get a response, tell me the error message you got. If everything tallies with what the product team or the QA tester is expecting, then you are, good to go, move on to a wider internal testing. So possibly, depending on what the agreed framework in the company is, you can move on to testing with a larger team. So maybe the product team has tested, the integrations team has tested, the sales team has tested. You move on to maybe the finance team, a bigger team that will sort of function in some sort of operations way. So you build some products and some adjacent teams in your company have to assist in some way to make it work. So think of a payments company. They need to have a finance team that pays attention to money operations, money sweeping, settlements, things like that. They may not necessarily be in the GTM team, but they also contribute to the success of that product. So they can be featured in a wider internal testing. External testing or beta is when maybe you've captured early interest for this product before now. Maybe businesses that previously requested the product are still, checking in saying, when will this be ready? So now you invite them to test or join a wait list or, expose the beta product to them. This also works across both B2C, D2C as well. And then you have a feedback loop where you capture observations and then return to maybe your product teams, your engineering teams, and say this is what they've observed. At the feedback loop area, the feedback loop can, influence a lot of things. It can influence how you now refine your value proposition. So sometimes you, as the person sitting on the team that builds the product or on the team that sells the product, you maybe do not take some things to be as amazing or as interesting as they are. So when you show the product to a customer or an early interest user, they now unlock a part of it that you knew existed but didn't really think was a major thing, right? So that now helps you improve your value proposition. So maybe you go back to your marketing team and say, oh, this person said that this is a great feature. So in your messaging, maybe you can add this as an extra point, or in your storytelling or narrative, maybe you can add this as an extra point. So let's go to pre-launch, which is where most GTM activity is sort of similar across various industries. So you have sales enablement, the marketing team is, and the product teams are tasked with making sure that the sales teams have materials, the knowledge that they need to sell the product, sales and marketing alignment. So at this point, for quota carrying teams, so there are some marketing teams that carry a quota and they say you have to provide the sales team with 200 sales qualified leads. You have to provide them with 200 customers from maybe your lead generation or your ads. So this is the point where you agree on what are we bringing to each other and how do we make that work. Your messaging development, of course, comes from, after all this time, being part of the process of the feature ideation. At this point you understand the product so well, so it makes sense that you're starting from that point. You have a lot of points for your messaging, you're updating or creating new landing pages, you are updating pricing sheets, you're updating customer resources, you're building video, you're making videos, you're building guides, or you are building demos that self-serve demos that people can walk through on their own. And then you have the sales and marketing automation. So we have marketing qualified leads, we have sales qualified leads, we have our pipeline, we have a flow. How do we make sure that we are not doing things too manually, creating errors, make sure that we capture people even without us looking, and then we're just able to monitor and measure. And of course, you have the point where you publicly announce. So that's the point where everybody sees, oh, wow, this great video, this nice product. They don't see everything from here and maybe up to here. They don't see everything that happens in the back room. They just see a public announcement. So in some ways, you're pulling strings. If you do things well enough, you're pulling strings to make sure that your customers follow the crumbs that you're leaving for them. So we've covered most of these things in this early explanation, but I will go a bit deeper on each slide. So these are GTM teams. For many companies, they're collapsed, they're the same thing, they're one team. There are companies where you have the product marketing team and the sales team and the account management teams as the growth team, just one team. There are companies that have the sales team and the account executives called the revenue teams. There are companies that have all three and call them revenue teams. There are customers where there is no difference. There are businesses rather where there is no difference between account executive, account manager, sales development representative, sales executive. There's no difference. You're just a salesperson, right? But at most of the companies I've observed, and including the one where I work, salespeople focus more on new leads, new conversations, pipelines, and so on. Account executives and account managers focus on, having a good relationship with existing customers who can help with early adoption of products because they already have a track record or a relationship with us, and the product marketing team sits separately. So in my team, on the growth team, we have the product marketing and account management teams together. So they're under the growth team. And then the sales team is called the commercial team. So you can see the areas that bind these teams together. You can see pricing strategy, value proposition development, feedback loops. These are the areas where all three teams, or one team if that's the case in the team you're on or the team you lead, these are the areas where they collaborate the most. So let's look at ICP development. On the right, you can see someone who is being force-fed some sushi rice. What happens if I don't develop, if I don't have an ICP for my product? It's like you're spraying and praying, like we say. You're not really sure what you're doing. You're just building and selling. How do I develop one? We'll go straight to that shortly. How can I be sure that my assumptions are correct? How can I leave room for flexibility? What's wrong with selling to multiple profiles? So these are questions that we will answer, but ideally, we should always understand that if we focus only on building products and do not focus on who they are for and refining that, it's going to be like force feeding people who do not want to eat something, a particular food, or making or forcing a friendship with people who don't want to be friends with you. So approaching ICP development, you can approach them in three ways. There are many ways to do this, but we're looking at three ways today, or three types of development for ICP. So for the sake of everyone, ICP is ideal customer profile. So there are three scenarios that I've covered here. The first type is an existing early stage company who has never done ICP development. So you've been spraying and praying up to this point, and maybe you've been seeing some revenue, so that's luck. And also maybe you have a pattern in there that you haven't noticed before. So some things you can do to help you develop an ideal customer profile is to run a product market fit survey. So let's say the company has been running for a year and a half. Obviously, you have, healthy retention, I hope. You have to run a product market fit survey first to understand if you actually have product market fit. And then from the survey, you can see patterns. Product market fit surveys often have questions that help you understand the relationship you have with customers, helps you understand maybe beyond Net Promoter Score, just how important your product is in the value chain of the businesses that you serve. So you run the PMF survey to evaluate your relationship. So think about a romantic relationship. Am I taking care of you? If I were to move countries, would you come with me? If I were to say that I do not want to take this approach on loving each other, would that work for you? If I were to increase my demands as a partner, would you stay with me? So that's equivalent to, if I were to double my prices, would you stay? If I were to expand to another country, would you open up there and come with me? If you had operations in that country, would you automatically use our service? If our service were to go down for 3 days, what impact would that have on your own service? So that helps you to understand from the answers of various customers where you sit with them. So am I important to them? Am I in need for them? Am I just a nice to have that they're using to, embellish their product? And then another way is to look inward. So you already have users, you've been running for a year and a half, 2 years, you have users. So you can profile the businesses or the customers that contribute the highest volume or the highest revenue. So what can you tell about them? Are there any similarities? Are they of the same age? Do they do the same job? Of course, based on the information that you collect at sign up and all that, and based on the actions that they perform. Do they subscribe to the same things? Do they use their cards to pay for the same things? As many ranges of behavior as you can profile. You look at the customers you have already. And then you look outward, of course. You profile your closest competitors' customers. So you want this to be as closely matched as possible. So let's say using the Notion and Coda example. So what can I tell about Coda customers? You go to their websites, you see businesses that use Notion, so you can see their names. Zendesk and Intercom, who are the businesses that, so I'm Zendesk, who are the businesses that use Intercom? Why do they use them? Are there any similarities? Are they predominantly maybe deep tech companies? Are they agri-tech companies? What can I tell about them? Are they really small teams, maybe teams of 5 people, teams of 50, 1,000, how much have they raised? Is this a product I should be targeting towards, businesses that have raised up to Series A, 60 million, unicorns, later stage businesses? And then after analyzing what you have, you decide on 3 tentative profiles, right? So you can't do more than yourself, as they say. So you look at 3 tentative profiles. Profile 1, I've noticed this pattern. Profile 2, I've noticed this pattern. Profile 3, I've noticed this pattern, right? So these are the 3 people that I will focus my messaging, my sales, my general GTM motion on. I think I found them. So it's still a think at the moment. It's, let's say, 40% assumption and 60%, you're sure 60%. So you then move on to, experimenting on the profiles in your next GTM motion with messaging and narratives and whatever else you have, right? So you have what you think is your profile now. So let's say you make this, you take this bet on a not so serious feature. You don't want to do this with a grand feature. You don't want to play with ICP development at an expansion, for example. You don't want to play with ICP development if you're, creating the biggest product you ever have or the biggest update you ever have. You want to try with smaller incremental features, so that by the time you arrive at 1 or 2 final pictures, your next major launch now has a more narrow place to go to. So maybe more revenue, more insights, definitely for you. So another way to approach ICP development is it can look different for different business models. So in D2C, it can be different. In B2C, it can look different. So type 2 is a new company at maybe MVP stage or pre-PMF stage. So let's say the company has been running for 6 months. They are raising funding. They are testing for revenue. Let's say this is a first few months of revenue company. So they're trying to raise from investors, and investors have said, oh, we would like to see some traction from you. Maybe they have some traction, but they're working on their deck and they want very clear information on who to say. I don't know if we've seen, decks that companies submit to VCs, but sometimes you see a portion where they speak about their addressable markets, where they speak about their GTM strategy. Those are two very important things that investors look out for. They want to be sure that you know how many people you can potentially serve, bottom up, which is looking at from the smallest to the largest, or top down, which is being most ambitious to being most realistic. So for a new company, like I mentioned in the beginning, most people are like, have to be strict with ICP. You have to choose one person and then give them all you've got. I have the be flexible, especially if you're a smaller stage, early stage company. So pre-PMF stage, you're working with a lot of assumptions. You don't even know yet if the businesses you had in mind to build the product for actually want it or actually need it or are desperate for it, or if this is a lasting phase or if it's a seasonal thing. These are things you hope to find out as you continue to run your business. So start out broad, look outward. Most times in the beginning, duplication is something that many businesses do, but of course duplication with a lot of sense, duplication with a lot of analytics, duplication with a lot of consideration. So look outward, duplicate, look at the profile of customers of your closest competitors, just like we talked about in the last type. Focus on the first GTM motion of the closest competitors at your stage. So what this means is, say I am a pre-PMF company, I'm 8 months old, I'm raising funding, and there is a business that has raised the next round after me. So let's say I'm raising seed funding and there's a Series A business, similar product to mine, but say I have more to offer, my product has more to offer. So I go back to what the outcomes of their GTM were. So maybe we can see they have a mobile app. They now have 500,000 downloads. I can look at some things they did. I can find that out on their website. How did those customers behave? Who are the businesses that use them so far? At the stage that, when they were at my stage, what were the GTM motions that they applied? Who were the people that seemed to buy into it, and so on? Thankfully we have social media, right? So now we can see how people are actually reacting to things. It's like when people say, oh, somebody tweeted my thoughts, so I'm happy to see what's going on with them. So it's the same thing. You kind of watch those companies and see how people behaved when they first launched, how people behaved towards their first GTM motion. So you also focus on patterns in inbound. So people who troop towards you, not the people you reach out to, people who fill your contact forms, people who sign up on their own if you are mostly sales-led, if you're product-led, people who start using the product without asking you, how do I do this? They just pay for a plan or get on the freemium and start doing their thing, right? They don't say anything to you. So you look at what is similar to all these people, and then again, you agree on maybe more than 3 profiles, 5 profiles because you're early, and then you experiment on those profiles in your next GTM motion, and you refine going forward. So from maybe 7, you can go to 5 profiles, go to 3, go to 2, and stay on there for a while until you're a later stage company and your growth rate is now similar for a terminal value. The third one is hard but easy. It's type 3, a niche new company at MVP or pre-PMF stage. So a niche company is one where the market is narrow, but the need is so great that they are not easily replaceable. They do not have too many focused competitors. So they may have, sorry, is that from me? Can I go on?
Yes, please. Jennifer, go on.
So they may have competitors, but they're not focused on the same things and maybe do not have the bandwidth to do the same things. So some successful niche companies, you usually find them in the deep tech, biotech, hardware verticals. They are building alternative protein. They're building climate technology that helps to sequester carbon. They're building robots that can be used in hospitals, that can be used in war. So these are some very niche companies that find it so much easier to, detect who their ICP is. In fact, from before they start, most times you find out that the founders are inundated with, a request for that particular solution or that particular product. So from out the gate, most of the time, their ICP has already chosen them. So say you create alternative protein, you have people who now have gut health issues, they have irritable bowel syndrome, they have Crohn's disease, they maybe have survived colon cancer, they do not want to eat animal-based protein, so they're looking at other sources of protein. If you're a niche company focusing on that, out the gate, you already have your customers. You know where to find them. What are the gyms that the top Silicon Valley people go to? You're advertising there. What are the gyms at hospitals that have, really big oncology departments? Johns Hopkins, the New York State University Hospital, you're there. So most times, niche companies, even at pre-PMF stage, already know who their ideal customer profiles are. And of course, they can still experiment, filter that out, maybe even expand a bit to more profiles or narrow down a bit to fewer profiles. But most of the time, really niche companies are married with their ICP already. So they don't spend too much time and find it less bumpy to figure out their ICP. So value proposition development, here you are asking or asking yourself, like the customer, what's your offer? Why can't I refuse? Your value proposition as a statement of your unique offering should, of course, be compelling. So it shouldn't be something that someone can look away from. Obviously, it's not manipulation, but it's something that holds a lot of weight to their value chain, to their bottom line, that makes them look back and say, okay, I will definitely try this because it's been an issue for us. So beyond the strength and quality of your product, note that the major thing that constitutes value proposition is the strength and quality of your product. So if you've built a bad product, or take, for example, you've been introduced to GTM phase just at the time of launch, you've not spent a lot of time understanding why you're building it. You've not spent a lot of time understanding who it's for. You've not spent a lot of time understanding or testing the product. Value proposition is going to be shaky. And most of the time, you would base that on what the competitor is doing, which may not work for you. Excuse me. So we have to start with building a solid product. An issue that most salespeople face is because there is a philosophy that, oh, the best skill you can have in life is being able to sell, being a great storyteller. People think that, the school of thought that as long as you're a great salesperson, you can sell a bad product. Yes, you can, but only for a limited amount of time. So you can sell a bad product for a year, and that attitude will max out because you have fewer and fewer returning customers. Retention will drop from 100 to 30 in no time. So you have to start out with a great product. So when people ask, is a bad product a product problem or a sales problem? It's both people's problems. Yes, of course, a bad product was built by maybe an engineer who didn't follow, what was put down, a tester who didn't test the product well, or a product manager who did not ideate properly. But at the end of the day, it still becomes a sales problem because when you go out to sell something that is not so good, you get a reality check very quickly, and people say, I don't want this, it's not useful for me, it's not working like you have sold. You're a great seller, but you've oversold this to me, and at this point, I have to churn. So you have to make sure you have a great product, which is why, again, it makes sense for GTM teams to join the the GTM strategy from the start, from product ideation, not from pre-launch. So outside of the strength and quality of your product, your value proposition should also be informed by competitive market analysis. So what's out there, um, is ours better? And then it should also be influenced by your target customers, use cases, and pain points. So why you built this in the first place, what you built this to solve in the first place, and early feedback. So let's call that, if we are going to put this to a mathematical expression, it would be competitive market analysis plus target customers, use cases, and pain points plus early feedback. It's in those square brackets because it may or may not be there at the point that you're doing your value proposition. Maybe you've not gotten any early feedback yet, you've not gotten any business ready to buy in and beta test the product, so it may or may not be there. But you need to have your competitive market analysis, your customers use cases and pain points that you have discovered, tested, and are almost 100% sure that this product will solve. So let's call that value A. Value B is the messaging, the narrative, the storytelling, the positioning that you back this up with. So a great value proposition is saying, I have this is the product, this is a great product. I have this over the competitors. And this product solves this major problem that you have. And from feedback that I've gotten from businesses similar to yours, doing as well as yours or doing even better than yours, this is what I'm offering you. Now, this is what I'm offering you. You can now, purposefully say that in the language, in the narrative, in the psychoanalytic way that customers that you hope to capture will understand. So your value proposition is definitely nothing without a good product. And it's also really helped and put up there by great competitive market analysis, target customers, use cases, and pain points, and how you solve that, and some early feedback that you've gotten, which gives a boost of confidence that your product is fit for purpose, and then messaging and storytelling that you use to make that look as good and make it put it in a place where you can capture as many eyes and as many interests as possible. So we move on to sales enablement. Again, this is an area that most salespeople and marketing people meet. Most times, it's the first place they're meeting to collaborate on a GTM motion. Most times, they've just been put together in teams or companies where sales and marketing are very disjointed. Sales enablement causes a lot of friction. It's the point where there's now a position of expectation of the marketing team, but the marketing team, approaching sales enablement from a strictly marketing perspective, not focusing on how does our team sell, what does our team put in place, how do they sound, where do they find their customers, so this is a major collaboration point. And if everyone follows, being together from the ideation stage, sales enablement is a point that shouldn't be the first meeting of sales and marketing teams, right? So you have to be married for a long time before you get to this point. So it's not something that you want to do with teams that work in silos. So marketing faces their ads, sales focuses on their customers. Oh, I have this lead. Can you help me edit this cold email? Okay, I've edited it, add a full stop here, go and sell. Those things don't work because you'll never be able to measure the outcome of the assistance that you get or the outcome of the collaboration that you get from marketing teams. So I have product marketing with product in brackets here because in some teams and some companies, they do not have, product marketers or do not call them so. You have life cycle marketers, you have just marketers, you have digital marketers, you have performance marketers. So depending on who is collaborating with sales on the marketing end, this is a broad blanket that covers that. So the sales enablement part of things is assets rich. So there are tangible things that you can see. You can see product education, which is you can have a face-to-face with the product team. You sit down, there's a huge whiteboard. You take the product to bits all over again. What does this part do? How can I best sell this part? I think sales and marketing teams that are very honest with each other and are very familiar with each other make a powerhouse, because someone on the sales team is comfortable enough to say, look, I don't even know how I'm going to sell this thing. Like, I know I'm technical, I know how to test it, but which word will I use? So this is the part where, you know, those conversations happen. You know, you're educating about the product, but at the same time, you're making the sales team into storytellers who can discuss what is going on with this product, who can confidently sell it to people, right? So you have product education, you have battle cards. Depending on who you're reaching out to and depending on your mode of reaching out, your channels, maybe you're doing a cold email, maybe you're doing something on LinkedIn, some set of people, depending on the sect of the ICP. Now, this is something that we didn't really focus on, but in every ICP, there are champions and there are buyers. Champions are usually the people who will use your product the most, and the buyers are the people who make the decision. So let's say that you build an accounting software. The champions are the finance operations people, finance product managers, project managers, finance officer, treasury officer, but the buyer is the CFO. So the champion is the person who goes, you see a personal email, test your product, sign up to test your product. You see someone reach out, ask how this works. That's a champion. They are the ones actually facing the problem. And they're also facing a reporting problem, because when it's time to report to CFO, or when it's time to report to head of finance or head of business, things are lacking. Things are not where they're supposed to be, right? But the CFO is the person who says, we have a $5,000 budget for tools. I'm not going to buy another accounting software unless you prove to me that this solves this major problem we have and other problems that we might encounter down the line. So you occasionally find champions to be the ones who test your product, be the ones who reply to your cold emails. But you know, you're in a dance, because a champion cannot say we're buying, depending on the amount of ownership or the amount of authority that they have on the team. They can't say, okay, we're purchasing this product. I've looked at it, I've even used it, and it works the way that it should. You can do a whole sales motion for 4 champions. They're on a call, they say it's great, but then you hear back and they're not moving on with, you know, the product. So it's the buyer that usually elongates the it's usually the buyer that elongates the sales time to value. The sales cycle is usually elongated by the buyer. The champions are the people who are more ready to try it out. So in most cases, if the champion is impressed, you have higher chances of impressing the buyer. If the champion is not impressed, then it definitely doesn't get to second base, right? So battle cards will be made, or sales enablement assets and materials will always be made according to what the buyer or the champion, those 2 parts of the ICP will need. Same as the decks. If you're going to talk to the CFO, the decks may look a bit different. If you're going to talk to the champions, the decks may look a bit different. If you're talking to both people, then you need to look at big picture stuff and execution level stuff. So if the CFO is going to be there, as well as the finance officers, when you are speaking directly to the finance officers on the deck, you may have a part that shows them, okay, how it optimizes their day-to-day, how it makes things easier, how they can track payments, still using the accounting software example. Now, if you want to focus on the buyer, the CFO, so that you don't lose them in the conversation, you focus on how it increases revenue, so better turnaround times for the company, business operations are doing better. So with each of these sales enablement assets, you have to go for what works for each part of the ICP. So let's move on. So we get to GTM motion finally, the seeing part, the part that is often mistaken for the whole. the parts that produces the outcome that most people get to see. So the messaging, the landing pages, the webinars you do, the ads, and so on. So I have some very clear examples for us because I wanted this part of things to be really practical, and I hope it's as let me try to zoom in here. I think that may do as well. So this is a GTM sheet, as broad and as extensive as possible, created by the Product Marketing Alliance. So because it looks different for various teams, you can discard or add parts of it that you think are important to you. So you have the task, you have the status, and you have start and end times and who is working on this, right? So at the GTM motion part, you're talking beta launch. So has that been done? Is that something the marketing team does? Who is doing that? What does that involve? The internal and external product demo videos. So remember I mentioned internal testing, external testing. So in the internal testing, there's some, back room, back office parts of it that may feature in the video. But in the external video, maybe the video is quicker, maybe the video shows more things that the ICP is looking to see. The sales battle cards, this is sales enablement, is that done? Face-to-face training with sales support teams and customer success, this is also sales enablement, is that done? Are the social media posts ready? Do we need to review copy for the landing page? So remember I mentioned you need to change some things, update pricing. Do we update the homepage to now show the product in the navigation, the drop down? Are we improving our chatbot? So if someone has a problem with that product and they type in the name, the chatbot runs macros based on that product so that the person can pick what the issue is. Are we doing blog posts? So we have launch blog posts to announce. We have follow-up blog posts post-launch to make sure that the awareness of the product really sinks in. Are we running paid marketing? Are we doing this on LinkedIn? Are we doing this on Instagram? Are we doing this on Twitter? Are we doing this on Reddit? And then you have things in progress. So there are things that a new launch will definitely affect. So does it affect your email signature? Do we notify specific partners about this? So now you have nurture email for prospect. So maybe the sales team or the account management team had a list of people that they wanted to see this product and they've been disturbing the product team, like, I need this yesterday, do it for me. And then we've done all the testing and it's right. So now you have to look at things like partner notes. So you now have to inform the partner like, oh, this product you want is ready now. Please test it. I'm happy to jump on a call with you and your team to test the product, to demo it to you. You have a blast email for existing customers. So they need to see that the company has launched a new product. You have a press release if you're that kind of company and you're seeking some PR for the product. Maybe the product has some social impacts. Maybe the product has a place in society. It's something that consumers have been looking out for. It's something that businesses have been looking out for. It's something that fixes a regulatory gap. It's something that truly makes lives better, as a whole. So maybe you want to pursue PR for that. You also go for that. Push notifications if you're mobile. And then you launch, you push all that out. Social competition for external launch. Do you want to gamify this? And send your first nurture email, right? So you have that list of people. Now let's get them, maybe from inbounds, let's get them to start being interested in it. I don't expect that from the first email they are going to use it. Those miracles happen, but not always. So let's send them the first nurture email and see what happens. You also send a blast email. If you're running ads, you start your pay-per-click campaign. You do a live webinar to show people who have been skeptical of the product, who don't want to enter their details and sign up. You follow up with the second nurture email. Maybe from your list, what you did with the first nurture email was to invite them to the webinar. So your nurture email could include a recording of the webinar and maybe another action that they can perform. Maybe in the second nurture email, you tell them about how another business is using it. And the third nurture email, maybe you've written a follow-up blog post about the product. You can plug that in there. And then you're gathering feedback from customers and customer-facing teams. You ask the customer success team, what has happened so far? Have you been inundated with requests, or have people complained about bugs, or have they shown that they don't understand the product? Now, as technical sales, you probably work with um, engineering adjacent teams are called integration teams or developer experience teams. Those are customer facing teams as well that ensure that if your product is super technical, they can assist with the integration process. So they take charge of things like the documentation, if there's one, and developer resources, maybe SDKs, and how people use the product. So you want to hear from them. Are they saying that the documentation is not enough, the resources are not working, it takes too long to integrate, the onboarding is not so good? So these are points of feedback that you can take back to product teams, engineering teams, even marketing teams and sales teams as well. So maybe the customer facing teams are getting requests like, oh, what does this part do? So that might mean that the marketing team hasn't really focused well on selling that part. So that can be an opportunity point where the marketing team now really focuses on. Optimize marketing channels. So let's say you're running ads on LinkedIn Navigator, but from a previous ICP development, you've now gotten more insight. So you go into LinkedIn Navigator and update with that new information you have, and it probably opens you up to more prospects. And then you run customer case studies. In some cases rather, some businesses actually start a launch with a customer case study. If you've seen Paystack's launch of Terminal, you can see that they started the launch with Burger King to show the terminal points at Burger King where people actually self-served with those POS terminals upfront. So it saved the amount of time that people were standing in queues to pay for their burger and their pizza and their meals and whatnot. So they led the launch with a customer case study. And this will tell you that the business had been using this product for a while. So it shows a motion that starts from ideation, early testing, early adoption, up to the point of launch. And then just to show us another example, we have a GTM motion here by Mahavohe. I don't know if I'm saying her name well, but she's a renowned GTM strategist, and this is a small part of a book that she wrote. So when I share this presentation, share the slides, I will probably share the links to these resources as well, so we can look at them at our spare time. But I'll just zoom in a bit here so we can look at what she has. In her school of thought, she says that stages of her go-to-market strategy have the proof of concept. So how will you get the first users to test the product? Proof of monetization, so willingness to pay. How will you get your first customers? She takes a very practical approach, like, okay, sit down together, enter these details and look at them, see if they make sense to you, and then from there you can build on that, right? So proof of at least one scalable GTM motion. So are you using partnership to launch the product? You built a product, it can be used by itself, but your ICP uses another product, that product plus your product will be wowzer. So maybe you pursue a partnership angle to your GTM motion. So proof of at least one scalable GTM motion. How will you get more customers predictably? Proof of a sustainable business model. What needs to happen for you to break even? So this is the part where pricing is a mathematical thing. So if we charge 10 naira and our competitor that is twice bigger than us can lower their prices from 12 naira to 3 naira in 24 hours, meaning that we now become the more expensive product. So sometimes you don't compete on price. You go for something sustainable. If your competitor is charging a certain price and your product is better, charge what you're going to charge. You also need to think of costs like, when I introduce this product into my cloud fees, do I start raking up a higher cloud fee? How do I break that down per customer? How do I make sure that this pricing is fair to different types of businesses that will use this product, right? So what needs to happen for you to break even? So an example of, or a way to think about is, how many enterprise customers can I get to make sure I make enough both revenue and profit to break even on what I'm spending to keep this product up. So let's say that cloud costs, website costs, all of those things, the amount of money you're spending on sales, $10,000, let's call it that. How many businesses, how many customers do I need to pay me a static amount for a year or a year and a half before I can break even and make maybe $10,100 at least, and then start going up from there? So you think about that. Proof of market expansion. Which markets do you plan to win next? What does success look like when you open new markets? She moves on to looking at, what does success look like to you? So in 3 to 6 months, what are some levers that you hope to move? There's something called a beachhead strategy, but we won't really go into that. And she looks at validation. You test the MVP, you make some bets, you look at marketing trends, solution tracing, surveys, interviews, things like that. This is where she has her GTM motion. So not very clear here, but you can see inbound, outbound, paid digital, community, partnership, account-based marketing, product-led growth. So like landing pages and emails, lifecycle marketing, account-based marketing, like targeting high-value customers with specific content, maybe specific webinars, partnerships like I described. Maybe you have a product, your product can do so much better for your ICP in collaboration with another product. So you do a co-marketing campaign and so on. So here you now enter all of the things that you figured out about your product. So here's what we know to be true about our target market. So you enter what you know about your ICP. What is your product? What does it solve? Here you're looking at the product market fit cycle. Who do you plan to sell to? How are customers currently solving this problem? So who are your competitors? If they're not using your product, what are they using? Your competitive edge. Why is your product the best one? How much are you charging? When do you charge? How do you charge? So this is another way to look at your GTM motion, maybe in the early stages, and also to decide on what the success of your GTM motion is going to look like. We're almost at the end here. So I wanted to capture some thoughts that we may have. Some of us are going into tech sales for the first time. Maybe it's your first role, you're in a tech sales internship, or it's your second role and you're still gaining some ground, or you are just trying to maybe make a pivot. You're thinking about moving from traditional sales to tech sales. You're trying to think of moving from a field marketing officer to tech sales. There are a few things you need to put in place and ensure that you do as the first salesperson on every team. So the ideal first salesperson on every team is the founder. Founder-led sales is great. I don't know if we know Bloom. It went by a different name. It's a company that helps people become developers at no cost and then charges them when they get jobs over a certain amount, right? So the founder was very bullish and aggressive in selling the product, selling in person of himself, selling what they're doing, how they're affecting, how they're changing the narrative for getting your first job without a computer science degree, with the boot camp. So founder-led sales is the ideal situation in a tech-led company or in a tech-enabled business. The founder is usually the first salesperson. But most times, of course, they want to move away from that so that it can just be a second function and they can focus on operational excellence. So they make the decision to hire a salesperson. So you need to understand the sales function as it translates to the business and that founder. You need to make sure that there is a philosophy match. How do you want to sell? How do you think you're going to make your first $1,000, your first $10,000? See if what you think about translates to what the business actually needs. So something I really stand by is, don't take a job if you don't know how you're going to survive the first 3 months, or if you have no sense of how you're going to achieve success in the first 3 months. So when you're at an interview, most times people ask, oh, what does success look like for someone in this role in the first 6 months, in the first 3 months? That's information that most times your interviewers, people who are interviewing you, maybe the manager or team members are happy to offer up, right? That's information you need to go back with and see if you can actually crack that success. Of course, there's a lot of context you'll be missing because at the time where they're interviewing you, you don't really know how the product works and you don't really know all the granular details that you need, right? But you need to take that information back, compare it with, businesses in that same space. How are they selling? What are they doing? How can I actually be a good founding sales hire if I were to join this company? What success can I make in 3 months? Is it by creating playbooks? Is it by creating a healthy pipeline? How can I, institute some success in my first 3 months? If you don't have an answer to that and really have no clue whatsoever, I would oblige you to not take the role because you may become frustrated, the founder may become frustrated, and it wouldn't be a good marriage. And in an early stage company, most times the idea is to fire fast because you want to move on, you don't want to spend too much time. In many early stage companies, a lot of hand holding isn't done. So you need to understand where sales sits for this founder at this time. If I join this team as a founding sales hire, does it mean there's a product marketer to do some sales enablement for me? Does that rely entirely on me? Do I need to understand how to do messaging? Do I need to know everything about developing ICP? Do I need to have product sense and product thinking so that I can work well with the early stage product team? So these are things you need to understand depending on the kind of business it is, the kind of founder you're about to start working with. The next thing is to know the product. The website is there, right? So if it's not a company in stealth, which is a company that is still trying to start and hasn't put itself out there at all yet, maybe you can't know the product and maybe you will be relating with the founder on a personal basis. But you need to know the product. You need to know what it does. If you can't understand it from the technical standpoint, then try to understand it from the standpoint of businesses that use it. Go to the website, say it's Intercom, look at any of the businesses that they have on their boilerplates that they use. Go and find out about that business. How would this business actually use Intercom? Then it can start to make sense. The picture is brighter and you understand at least 10% of what the business does. Then you understand the products 10%. Then you understand how the business makes money. Then it's clearer to you what you will be doing here. What kind of business do you think the product should focus on selling to? And then you understand that sales is about math. Same calculation we did. So the product spends this to stay up, it spends this to sell, it spends this to do marketing. If I'm a quota carrying member of the team, which is what most salespeople are, how do I make sure that I can agree to a realistic quota? Because sometimes quotas are pushed on salespeople or get 100 enterprise people. Are there even 100 enterprise level companies that can pay enterprise level prices? Can you confidently say to the founder or whoever it is that, I think our prices are a bit high and we can come down a bit. And this is my idea for how we can make up for that, level up the product and also match the pricing to be higher so that we can maximize revenue. You need to be great at research, right? You have to read everything that comes your way. Same with immersing yourself in knowledge. If you're moving into fintech as a tech salesperson, sign up to all the tech sales fintech newsletters. Understand at base level how fintech works, how the aspect of fintech you're in works, and the parts that partner with it, the parts that collaborates with that part of fintech you're in. Understand how it works in the grand scheme of things. Follow thought leaders, people who actually share practical things that you can learn from. Show openness to experimentation. So there's obviously a lot that you don't know when you're coming in as a founding sales hire, but you need to be ready to move away from what you've always known, and willing to experiment to show that I don't have all the answers, but if I push this button and this button, they may take a screenshot, but then I will know, right? I will understand what's happening. I can come back to you and say, this is what I discovered. So again, measure and report always. What you put in most times, no matter the role you're in, not even just tech sales, what you put into the work most times is, yeah, you're supposed to do the work anyway. You met the expectation, but at the end of the day, it's what you get out of it. What are the outcomes? What are the results? So I ran sales automation. I have 10 nurture emails. I start with 200 customers, 200 prospects. And by the 10th nurture email, 50% of those customers have booked a meeting with me. 10% of those customers have booked a meeting with me. None of those customers booked a meeting with me. So now you have to go back to your nurture emails and see what is going wrong, right? Why am I reporting zero? What's happening? So you need to measure and report, because anything you don't measure, you can't improve. And then you need to be decisive. So there are tons of options available to you. There are tons of channels. Rather than saying, oh, I don't know how to do account-based marketing, I don't know how to do demand generation, borrow parts of account-based marketing, borrow parts of demand generation that speak to the kind of products you're doing. So maybe you don't know how to do account-based marketing, but you speak well when you do a webinar, right? So try to do 3 webinars, right? In 3 months, do 3 webinars. Speak about the parts of your product. If you can't speak well, look for people in your company that can buy into that idea. At the end of the day, we're all trying to maximize revenue, sell the product. So find those people, put them in front of the camera, share your idea with them, tell them, look, this is what we are doing now. We're selling these products with webinars. It is my demand generation effort. I want to experiment with that and see what happens, right? So just choose something. Don't be defeatist and say, oh, I can't do this. They need it now. I can't now go and do a course to learn it. So just try something, right? Decide on something and run with it and come back with, a result. Something that every founder, every business person, anyone that starts a company, every teammate loves is someone who gets the work going. It's not someone who says, I can't, I don't know, how do we begin? Just begin, right? Decide on something, put your best foot forward with it, and come back and say, this is what I discovered. And then you go on from there. If you don't try, you almost never try, because you don't have any evidence to say, this is what I learned when I tried the last time. And then we come to success. The matrix that ensures success for most GTM motions is the coherence of that GTM motion. Does what we are doing make sense? If my product does not need a leg up in partnership to go live, do I need to run one, right? If your GTM motion has no coherence, it's not cohesive, then you will most likely fail, because what you now have is all the things that happened in the back that nobody can see. Um, Collaboration and early involvement also is a major part of success. If you're not brought in from the beginning, you are lost, and then you're making up for lost time that you don't know you've lost in the end. So you're working with half-baked idea of the business, half-baked idea of the product rather. Your messaging is just, you're hacking your way through it. If the customer says this business helps us do this, you go and edit the website and say this business does this, or you let the product marketer know that, look, you should add this thing, whether or not it's exactly what you're looking for. If you don't have collaboration and early involvement, it makes for a bad mix, because at the end of the day, you're not moving in sync with all the teams that contribute to this magic. There needs to be clarity as well, right? So clarity of thoughts, clarity of execution. This is where we are now. It's very clear to me that this isn't where we need it to be. So we need to work harder. This is the messaging. Is it clear? This is the value proposition. Can anybody understand it? Right. So these are the parts that you really need to look out for. And then you need to look at product quality as well. Like I said, that's the major part of everything. Of course, you can sell a bad product if you're a bad salesperson, if you're a great salesperson, but only for a limited amount of time. It won't keep working. So you need a great product. And all of these measure up to 99.9%. So you need 0.1% for luck. Yeah, so that's what we have. Thank you very much for listening, and I will be taking questions now.
Hi, Jen. Thank you so much for this session. Before you go ahead with your questions, please, we have some questions that have already been asked.
Okay.
However, before I go into the questions and answer session, I'd like to announce quickly that we have free tickets to give away for GrowthCon. Growth Conference will be happening on the 26th and 27th of July at VI. So if you'll be available on 26th and 27th, I think that's on Saturday and Sunday, and you want to attend GrowthCon for free, join our community, introduce yourself on the Introduce Yourself channel, and then comment, see you at GrowthCon. We'll reach out to you and we'll give you a complimentary ticket. So yes, thank you. So Jen, thank you very much. Some of you might be wondering why we brought a core product marketing person. And one of the reasons we did that is because go-to-market is a collaborative effort between marketing, sales, BD, and other stakeholders. However, it's championed by marketing. So it's very important that we are hearing the basics, the granular details about it from a product marketing person who does this. This is like the core of what she does. So depending on the structure of your organization, right, some sales and BD professionals actually have overlapping responsibilities with marketing on go-to-marketing strategy. I'm sure some of you would have identified that in the presentation and the teaching, right? Some of us actually work in companies where things like, say, pricing strategy, marketing development, and that would cover your target market, obtainable market, addressable market, value prop, and core. Some of those things are within the scope of a business developer, a revenue ops person, or even a sales manager. So I hope that wherever you fall in this category as of today, you're able to pick something to, help you learn how to better collaborate with marketing on go-to-marketing motions, or even fine-tune your process. If you're one of those sales BD people that fall in one of those companies where you have to do most of these things, or you're expected to do most of these things, I hope you've been able to pick up something to at least help you, fine-tune that process. So we'll go to question and answers now. And I would ask the questions on my end that have been asked prior to the meeting, and then we'll take questions from the audience. Yeah, thank you. So Moise is asking, how can I create a best go-to-marketing strategy? Moise is asking tips to create a best go-to-marketing strategy. Jennifer, I don't know if you have things to add, but I believe you've covered this wide enough in your presentation from pre-post development to pre-launch. However, if there's anything you would want to add to give Moise tips, we'd really appreciate that.
Okay, thanks for the question, Maurice. I would say that the very first thing to do is what I shared with you is theory, right? And a lot of practicals, but also something you need to think about is where is my team today? So you can't just plug your team into what I've shared today. It may not work. So you need to, align the realities of your team, the realities of your product to what you have, right? So if you have all the members of the team maybe referenced in what I've shared, you have the same problems, maybe doing a one-to-one will work. But if you can't do a one-to-one, look at the parts of it that will get you over the line. So where do you have the biggest problem? From what I've shared, you can pick and choose the parts that make the most sense to the reality of the company and the reality of the product today, right? So I'm just saying, tailor it to what you have. And sometimes the idea of everything is to execute at quality. So if you have only 4 processes, execute those 4 processes to the highest quality possible and report back. If you report back and you notice that there's a significant step missing, a significant outcome missing, then you can go back to this more general thing I've shared and then pick and replace or pick and add something you think will, move you up. But I wouldn't necessarily suggest that, you just take what I have. It depends on what works for your team, which is why different GTM strategists and revenue operators have different schools of thoughts on how to operate this. But the idea is to understand where the product is at, the points that you've also failed at, and the points that you've succeeded really well at. So that's what I would add essentially. I hope that helps.
All right, thank you, Jennifer. Moise is on the call, so I'm hoping your question has been answered. Maidu is asking, this question is in a funny way, but I hope you understand, Jennifer. Maidu is saying, for developing go-to-market strategy for a company from an outsider standpoint, what strategy framework or pillar should be pitched to the organization?
Okay, so if I understand this correctly, you're probably in this position, you're probably trying to be a consultant, maybe you're interviewing. Something that helps is to look at their product launches. So the scene part, look at their product launches and their GTM motions over the last, say, 3 months or over the last 1 year. What can be better with what they have? So is their messaging bad? Are their landing pages bad? So focus on the parts that you can see first of all, right? And that gets you a foot in the door. You can see their landing pages, you can see their websites, you can tell if they do webinars or not. In your opinion, if you think they should be doing webinars and they are not, then that's something you need to add in your GTM strategy or pitching to them. If you think that they should be doing better ICP, so from the messaging, you can sort of guess who the ICP is, because based on the solution that they are pitching or based on what they think that they solve, you can tell if they are talking to the right people or not. If a payment company that services small and medium businesses is in their messaging focusing on end users who actually make the payments, then you know there's a mismatch there. So if, for example, you saw Flutterwave speaking to end customers like you and I saying, oh, spend your money, or in their messaging, you see things like, don't worry about how you spend your money, or we secure how you spend your money. That's not who they should be focusing on. They should be focusing on other payment businesses. They should be focusing on small and medium businesses, e-commerce businesses, and enterprises. So that's how you can, so from the front, you can tell what's happening behind, right? So focus on the parts of the GTM over a year, over 6 months, or as much as you can find, and then go from there. So if there are parts of it that they should have that is lacking, then you speak on that and show how it can be better. So maybe if you're getting interviewed, you can look at, oh, based on what I've surmised or based on my assumption of who your ICP is, I think your landing page messaging will be better this way. You will capture more organic traffic if you put it this way. If you change the arrangement of your website, maybe you have your contact form a bit more upfront, you will do better, right? You may not be 100% correct, but if you're going for any of these things, getting hired, being a consultant, it shows a lot of effort on your part, right? So you have to make sure that those assumptions are as near to the truth as they can be. And, you're not just shooting in the dark. Yeah, that's what I would suggest.
All right, thank you very much, Jennifer. Koye, we can take your questions. Please go ahead.
All right. Thank you, Dara. Thank you, Jennifer. Yeah, you mentioned something during your presentation about pricing at a point or price point that is profitable. Now, how do you do that considering that we are in a very price sensitive market like Nigeria? Every price point matters, and it's a decision factor for businesses. So case in point, if you look at many startups in the country, whenever their funding dries up, the companies die because they are not profitable. And this is because for you to like make some traction in the market, you need to drive down your prices. So how do you balance that when you're going to market?
Okay. Many angles to that, to be honest. There's the angle of in revenue. There's also the angle of making profits. Now, the way that investors, business leaders see that is that investors are happy to invest in a business that is not profiting, as long as they're making revenue. So it means people are using this and they see some use in it. Of course, over a certain amount of years, so over 5 years, you're not making any profit, you're probably considered to be dead in a sense. But the fact that we're in a pricing sensitive market and businesses dying because they didn't drive pricing higher, not necessarily the same thing. Businesses usually die if it's a money issue because they have not done ICP work most of the time. If you work with maybe investors a lot, people overestimate the market that they're serving most of the time. So you find that founders do a top-down approach to addressable market. So you have addressable markets, serviceable, obtainable market. So you can service this market and you are sure you can capture it. Most founders, most people who start businesses look at it from a target addressable market. So how many can I address? How many will potentially just be open to this business, right? So you have that. You also have de-risking the business. So I have a product that is my major product, but you have to at various points ask yourself, while this pricing is okay and I'm making revenue, I have to think of other streams. Do I pivot? Do I create other offshoots of the product? And like I mentioned, ICP work is the biggest part of this. If you don't know your ICP, you don't spend time developing it, the product will reach a terminal stage and die because you would not have learned anything about your customers. So I built a product. It's going well. It's going okay. Something business owners, founders, product people do not think about is the fact that for every single day you operate that business, somebody is building something so much better than yours, right? So customers churn for various reasons. Like they can churn because, oh, I've seen something else. Your ICP can churn because you just increase price without telling them. Your ICP can churn because a key person moved to their team and took a product that they were used to at their own company and asked for that to be integrated because that's what they're used to, right? So you lose business. The only way to ensure that you stay above water is to continue evaluating the people that you serve, continue making sure that you're listening to them in a big enough number. Now, you don't make a change to your product because just one high revenue customer says you should. You're going to lose, numbers. Other businesses are going to say you didn't consider me, and you may not hear that until they've left, right? So two things. Of course, you have to price to be profitable. You also have to make sure that you're not competing mindlessly on price. So you see some businesses never do things like giveaways because at the end of the day, that doesn't profit anyone. You also see businesses that right out of the gates, they are charging. They don't do a free situation, and then when they now want to charge, they lose customers. I don't know if we have someone from Kuda here, but Kuda is an example of that. Kuda ran free transfers for a really long time. It served in bringing a lot of customers into the door, but they reached a point where it became inevitable to charge customers. You can't fault them for that. It needed to happen, right? And then they did charge customers. And then some people left. I'm sure they saw some churn from that or reduced use. But at the end of the day, what you always fall back on is the quality of your product and how you are iterating it to what your customers need. So those people who churned as a result of pricing for transfers may have come back because they've gone out there and used some other banks and they didn't work for them, right? They didn't get their transfers confirmed on time, and they're even charging more, So at the end of the day, yes, you price to stay sustainable and keep your head above water, but all you really have is executing excellently, building things over and over that people actually need, not things that will expire, not for business modes that will expire after 3 months. Like you're building exactly what people want. So you have to keep thinking what you have to also keep listening to your customers, right? So yeah, that's what I would say.
All right, thank you, Jennifer.
Yeah.
All right, thanks, Jennifer. Bello, I don't know if Bello is still on the call, but Bello had his hands up. So Bello, you can go ahead with your questions or your question.
Jennifer, thank you so much for the beautiful presentation. The session is actually very insightful. Okay, as for me, the challenge I have around sales is the unethical practice that exists in the industry. So yes, you have your competitors giving bribes, let's just put it that way, or adding a markup to the price. So I don't know if you have any ideas on how to navigate that, because my company is purely ethical. There was a time that I was actually brought up by my colleague that this is what is killing the business. Even the people we are serving, actually, they don't mind buying at high price as long as they get their personal gain outside their organization. So this has always been a challenge, though we've actually improved in our quality at the TAT. So this helped in some ways, but really the market share is really dropping. So I don't know if you have any idea on how we can even manage that. Thank you.
Sorry, I may have missed you for a bit. Maybe it's my internet, but when you say you know, you there's something unethical and people are getting their cuts. Can you explain that a bit? I'm not sure I caught it.
Okay, my customers that I service. So while discussing price, we've observed that competitors give return bribes. They give bribes. Let's say the product is
Oh,
the unit price is 1,000. These are our customers now say, okay, add my cut to it. Add 20 naira, add 50 naira. That price you pay back to me. I don't know
hmm.
whether I get
I see
it.
what you mean. So it's a value chain where there are some people in charge, right? And they ask
Okay.
for a certain amount to be added, so
Yeah.
they can make a cut. It's a situation where you have to stick with your principles, depending on where those principles are at the moment, right? So does it pay me? Am I setting a precedence by saying, okay, I'll give you your cut? The cut can be 10K today, the cut may become 50K tomorrow, and then they just drive you wild because they have you on a noose that if you don't give me my cut, no business for you, right? So you have to decide if that business is worth keeping. Businesses can sack their customers. That's something that you can do. So if that business isn't worth keeping, you know, it's bringing the volumes, but it's driving your operations crazy, it's taking money off the table for you, then you have to sit down and have a conversation, maybe with some other trusted person at your company and say, this is what's happening. You also have to weigh the options. Maybe you've thought about reporting them to leadership. That may work, that may not work. You may be having second thoughts because if I report this person, they may lose their jobs altogether, and now I'm taking food away from a family, right? So this is why I say it's more a principle situation, and I can't say apply my principles here, right? But I would say choose peace of mind and sustainability for your operations. If working with these people has been hell because they keep doing things anyhow they like, then you have to let go. There is a place for a finder's fee. Even enterprise B2B SaaS companies take that approach. There's a finder's fee such that people say, okay, for any, so you have a business, let's say you use my product, right? And I tell you that if you're able to sign another business up, I will give you this cut out of it. So there's a place for a finder's fee, but you have to try to either make it a limited amount of money or make the finder's fee a one-off. So we've paid you off for introducing us, you've been a middleman and agent, but this cannot continue to go on. So you have to check in with your principals. You have to check in with, you know, if you're able to allow this, For how long and for how much? And how does this drive my business? Does it make things go crazy? Does it drive up how much we have to charge and things like that? So at the end of the day, business realities, your principles, and think about both and see which one serves you. I could tell you, oh, I don't believe in bribe, don't do that. It means you're a bad person. But at the end of the day, you want to make revenue. So you have to sit down and decide, am I setting a bad precedence? Does this align with the principles I want to start my business with? What does this say to my employees? Does it say that even other people that use us now have to rely on them? And then they also add their own fees because I am encouraging this behavior elsewhere. So you have to think about matching business realities to, what you want to look forward to in the future, basically.
All right, thank you. I've been able to pick 2 or 3 points that will be useful for me. Thank you so much. So I have one more thing. You made reference to Kuda when they did the cost of customer acquisition by transaction fee, even cost of ATM card at a very, very reduced cost. Same goes for PalmPay, OPay, MoneyPoint right now. These are the fintechs now. Okay, now, but you didn't conclude on they got it wrong, yes. But at what point should they make that move, or how do they transition from? Because it is needed for them to penetrate the market. The big guns have already acquired all the market. So in order for them to penetrate, they found a strategy of a fee transfer. It worked at the earlier stage, but at what point? Where did they get it wrong? What are they supposed to do? Because from the beginning, yes, it's not sustainable, but it was needed to enter the market. So what would you have advised, or what do you think they should have done?
Right. So if I'm getting you right, I wouldn't say they did something wrong. I would say that something was working and it became inevitable to continue that trend. Again, growing pains, difficult things that businesses have to do, right? So you start out, and because of the market we're in, it makes sense to do a giveaway. It makes sense to cut things down to acquire people, right? It makes sense to let people use things for free. But these are things that you have to answer in the beginning. Now, I can't say for sure if we were to ask leadership at Kuda, they would say, well, maybe we would have done it differently. And the chances are that they would say we would have done the same thing. Like if we had another chance, we would do the same thing, right? But the important thing is, again, measurement. You have an acquisition budget of $1 million, for instance. How many free transfers am I going to allow before I hit this mark? And how many free transfers am I going to allow before I let an acquisition tactic become expected behavior, right? So if you're allowing free transfers for a limited amount of time and you've calculated it before your GTM sets into motion, you can say that in different aspects, you will infuse in your message that for early adopters, within 3 months of joining the business or signing up, will get free transfers for 3 months in their life cycle of the business, right? So you can find a way to infuse that in the message early on and set the expectation that this is not forever, right? So 2 things: for how many transfers until I reach that allocated budget for acquisition, and how many transfers until a handshake becomes an elbow fight, right? So these are the things that you have to think about. It's okay to do free things in the beginning, but you have to find a way to set an expectation when things will take shape. Most people will say, start out strict in the beginning, maybe do a discount, but never free. Different markets, different applications. In Nigeria, it almost seems like a staple that you have to do some of these things. So think about how much and for how long, always.
Thank you. That'll be all. This is good. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Jen. I hope your questions have been answered, everyone. Thank you for joining the session. Time is fast spent, so we won't be able to take any more questions. However, you can connect with Jen on LinkedIn. I will share a link to our LinkedIn profile shortly. So you can connect with her on LinkedIn, and then if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. Thank you so much, Jen, for sharing your insights with us. It is very exciting and refreshing to have you here. Thank you for spending time here with us tonight. I hope everyone has been able to get something, like you said, to improve your go-to-market strategies and areas where you get to collaborate with the marketing team. To access the slides for this session, please join our community. We'll be sharing the slides that Jen has presented along with the resources, and the recording of this session would also be available to our community members. So if you'd like to access this, please join our community. And if you're new here, TSP is a community for people in tech sales, business development, partnerships. If you are in a tech commercial role and you need your own people, please join us. We have people here who are aspirants. We have people who are in different levels of their tech sales career. Please join us. And then we have sessions like this on a monthly basis and also fiscal hangouts as well. So yeah, thank you everyone for joining. Before you leave, please hold on for me to share Jen's LinkedIn link.
Thank you so much, Sarah, for having me, and thank you everyone for listening. I think it's almost been 2 hours, so thank you so much.
Yes. Thanks, Jen. Thanks. So yes, you can see the link in the chat box. Please connect with Jen on LinkedIn. Join us next month for another session. We have our mentorship session coming up. We have our info session rather coming up on Friday. So please join us for that session. Register, join in. Thank you, everyone. Have an amazing night. Bye. Bye, everyone. Thank you.